So now we're going to look at the actual project for the finished video, and I want to talk about some of the scenes and how we pulled them off. Obviously, we want this video to look as professional as we can make it. We didn't want to give it that amateur look like we were just a couple guys making a video, even though that's what we were. For those of you who know me, I've been making films for a while, and I've learned a lot about cinematography and getting the best image, but a big part of what's going to help your cinematography is not just how you set up the camera, but the lighting and the set design. And so we wanted a sort of cohesive theme here. So since the plant is green, that's sort of the color we picked for our set design. You'll notice that in most of the scenes, my character's wearing green. In his apartment, we've got a lot of green components, and it just ties everything together and gives it kind of a nice visually pleasing look. So if you look at this first shot here, you can see we've got these nice lamps in the shot, kind of creating like a nice warm tone, and we've got the plant in the foreground here, and in the background you can see the green colors. There's just kind of a cohesive color palette here, and it all works together. When you're designing your set, you actually want to start with your wide. So if we go to the wide shot here, if you get your wide shot set up really nicely, then your close-ups are going to look good as well. The wide shot might look fine, but everything out of the frame, like, it was a big mess. So the rest of the apartment, you know, didn't look as good as what showed up on camera. But that's all that matters. Don't be doing all this set design without acknowledging the camera. You want to set up your widest shot first and then do your set design. Now, one critique I will make about this is typically it's not very good to have plain white walls. It does look pretty amateur and pretty boring. So if I could go back, we would have gotten a few more pictures to put on the wall or something, but this shot only shows up a few times. Most of the shots in the video are close-ups. But for the most part, I'm pleased with how this came out. I think it looks really nice. It was actually coincidental that Sam's girlfriend had these pictures of plants, and so it's like, hey, they're green, they match with the theme, let's use that. So we hung those up on the wall, and then Sam went out, got some green pillows. I found this green tablecloth from a friend, and was able to use that as kind of a blanket for the background, and you can see I'm wearing green. So everything, there's kind of these earthy tones along with the green that kind of makes things pop out and stuff. So it's very worthwhile to take the time to have good set design, because that's what's going to make your shots look more visually pleasing. So for this puzzle effect, this is actually kind of interesting. I was thinking my character's going to go to sleep, and I thought having these puzzle pieces falling in slow motion would be kind of a nice transition into the dream world. I was doing some tests trying to figure out how I wanted to do it. I figured I wanted the background to be black, I knew that, and so I needed light just on the puzzles. But what I would do is I would take the puzzle piece, and when I would hold it up to the camera and drop it, it would drop too quickly. It would, boom, it would just quickly go out of frame. So even if I put it in slow motion, it wasn't that nice, smooth, silky, falling look that I wanted. And so I was trying to think, okay, how do I get by this? Well, thankfully I've got some nephews and nieces, and with them being kids, we've got these big puzzle pieces. And so what you're actually seeing here, these are actually really big puzzle pieces. And if you've seen the B-roll, you'll see they're like the size of our hands. You know, we're grabbing them. And what we were able to do is pull them back so that they appear smaller. And when we drop them, they spend more time in the frame. So that way, when you put it in slow motion, it's much more pleasing to look at, and you get more detail. So I just had to find like a puzzle set that had a similar color palette to what our puzzle was going to be, which our puzzle, by the way, was custom designed. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you look at this shot here, you can actually see that's a dinosaur right there. It was just some dinosaur puzzle set, and but it had a lot of greens and earthy tones to it, which was our color theme. So I figured they'd be falling fast enough to where you can't really identify what they are. But yeah, that's how we pulled that effect off. And then when they're hitting the table, these are the actual regular sized puzzle pieces, and that was fine because they were falling in frame and you were getting them bouncing around and stuff, so that worked out just fine. So for the dream world, we had to figure out how we were going to shoot this and how we wanted to represent the dream world. I didn't want there to be anything distracting. I wanted the single character with the table and the puzzle set and just surrounded by darkness. I've seen that effect before. I'm sure many of you have seen this effect before, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. Really, what you need is you just need a really big space, and you want light on your subject and then nothing else, so that it's just completely dark behind them. The biggest room I could think of that we would have access to is the fellowship hall at my church. So I went and shot a few tests there. If you look at the test footage, you can see that there's all these tables there, and I kind of moved some of them out of the way. I didn't want to move them all out of the way because I just wanted to kind of get a feel to see if this was even going to work. And sure enough, I was convinced, like, yes, this is going to work great. So when we went on the actual day, we had to take some time and move all those tables out of the way so that we could get that true never-ending blackness behind us. And the lighting ended up being really simple because there are light switches that turn on individual rows of fluorescent lights in the ceiling. So we were able to turn on just one row of lights, position ourselves under those lights, and then shoot so that the furthest wall was behind us. And yeah, it worked out great. I think the lighting looks really cool, and it's a very simple setup, but that ended up being a pretty frustrating shoot. We got all the puzzle stuff first, but we had to put the puzzle together, so that ended up taking a lot of time. That was something I didn't anticipate, and when we put it together, we didn't even put it together on the right table. So we had to move it over, and it kind of fell apart, and we had to put it together again. So if you're doing something with a puzzle, make sure if you got to put it together that you're putting it together where it needs to be. Now for the puzzle, it was going to be tough to find something that, you know, just like buy some random puzzle that would work, but I was just thinking it would probably stick with the theme of a plant, and I think I was looking for puzzles like that at first, and then I realized I think I'm gonna have to design this. My sister actually gave me the idea because I think for her boyfriend she had a picture of them, and you send it into Walmart and they turn it into a puzzle. So I was like, hey, I can do that same thing. I just take a picture, send it into Walmart, and they'll print it out for you as a puzzle. And so I had to go into GIMP and just find pictures from Google and design this. So I just looked for a picture of a plant and kind of made a background, and I looked up some YouTube videos on how to kind of give it that kind of painting look. You know, I didn't want it to look like a photograph, but the dream world ended up working out just fine. It's, you know, it's just a chair and a table, and we found this red tablecloth that looked kind of nice, and it sort of popped out nicely with the since green was kind of the main color of the puzzle and stuff. They just complemented each other nicely. And then for the band, we just shot each instrument individually. So we set up the drums first and got all that footage. That actually ended up being a really challenging shoot because Sam had work the next day, and we had to shoot at night, obviously, because we didn't want light coming in through the windows. We pulled the shades, but we didn't want any light. We wanted it to be dark. And Sam had to get his parts done really quick. So one thing that kind of helped save time was because we were able to do the pre-visualization, we were able to see where certain instruments would show up in the video. And what I mean by that is, when we shot our first video together, we almost overshot. We got so much footage because I just wanted to make sure we had a good take. So basically we'd set the camera up and we'd do like 3 takes of him playing the drums, and then we'd set the camera up in a different position and do 3 more takes. But that takes forever, and you don't even use all that footage. You're kind of just going through and picking little parts for the song. So by doing the pre-visualization, we were able to see, hey, here's a section of the song where we know we're going to need band footage, and the drums sound really cool here, so let's make sure we get a cool shot of the drums playing that fill or whatever it is. So I focused more so on getting the highlights of the drums and breaking it up instead of just having him shoot through the whole thing. So we were able to get through his part fairly quickly, but then Sam had to leave and I had to shoot my parts by myself. I had to shoot my vocals and my guitar. So again, that's another reason why I would suggest trying to shoot on when you don't have some kind of time restraint or obligation that you have to worry about. It seems to happen all the time where you'll shoot a video, you're looking at the footage, and you're just like, man, this is terrible. This is going to be an awful video. But I want to kind of encourage you and let you know that the audience is only going to see the final product. And the final product is going to be the best shots that you got. So they're not going to see all the garbage. You know, it's kind of discouraging when you're digging through all this garbage and you're like, man, these shots are bad, they're awful. But you find one, you're like, hey, that one's actually pretty good, or this one's passable, and you put them together, and then when you watch all of those shots, the best of the worst shots, all together collectively, suddenly you realize, hey, this isn't so bad. And that's kind of what happened with me. I was really discouraged about this video. It was really challenging to do the shoot, and I was just thinking, man, this is going to be a rough video. But when I finally watched the first cut, when I had done all the scenes, I picked out all the shots, and I watched it through, I remember thinking like, whoa, I don't want to jump the gun, but this is pretty good. And I remember watching it again. I watched it like 10 times in a row, and I started realizing, hey, this is actually a pretty good video. I'm pretty proud of what I was able to pull off. And so just keep that in mind. Sometimes you might have a lot of bad footage, but people are only going to see the best stuff that you got. You know, once you pick out all those best bits and you put them together, then you end up with something really special. So just try to keep that in mind when you're shooting, and just try not to get discouraged. Now, as for the editing's pretty straightforward. You kind of just cutting scenes and syncing them up with the music. In iMovie, that's actually pretty tough, but what I ended up doing was I used the previs, I used that footage, and I brought in the new footage and put it on top. So, for example, in the previs here, this opening shot of me watering the plant, I would take the actual shot and just put it on top. And then once I was happy with how it was placed and how it worked, I would delete the old shot and replace it with that one. So that way the timing stays the same, because iMovie has this annoying thing where if you delete a shot, all the scenes, move in, like they don't stay in place. So that's really challenging for a music video, but there are ways to get around that. Now, thankfully, I didn't need too many visual effects to do in this video, but if you're creative, there are some interesting effects that you can do with iMovie. One thing I ended up using in this video, surprisingly a lot, was Ken burns. Ken burns are when you actually create a digital movement where your screen is moving. You crop the scene and then you have it move from one side to the other side of the frame, or you have it zoom in or zoom out or whatever effect you want. There's a shot of Sam here, and I've got a slight Ken burn that is panning from left to right, and it's super subtle. You almost don't notice it, but it gives just a little bit of energy. And you have to be very subtle with Ken burns, because if you do them too much, they can be kind of cheesy looking. But if you do them subtle enough, they can add a nice energy to the shot. This shot here where I'm looking at the puzzle piece, I'll go ahead and take the Ken burn away. Here's what it looks like without the Ken burn. And you can see it's just kind of like whatever, I move my head out of the way and it's just this still shot of the puzzle. So when we add the Ken burn back, you'll notice it's this slight zoom in towards that missing puzzle piece. And it just creates a little more energy, and it has a nice, it just goes nicely with the music, but it's super subtle. It's a very small movement. If it was like this really big zoom, it'd be too obvious, and again, it'd be kind of cheesy. I also use it at the end here when my character notices the puzzle piece and the broken pot pieces. You can see he looks down and there's this very subtle zoom in just towards that puzzle piece, just to kind of hone in on what my character is looking at. Same thing in the scene where my character gets the text message. Just to make it more clear what to read, I wanted to kind of zoom in towards the text. It's such a short shot and the words are kind of small, so I didn't want people to be like seeing the shot and then not sure what to look at. So I wanted that Ken burn to kind of help guide their eyes towards the text that he was getting and to be able to read it. And then probably the biggest or most difficult stunt or thing we had to do in this video was where my character is throwing the house plant against the wall. And we had to do a lot of preparation for this. The first weird thing about this scene is that we had to figure out the best angle, which was the one that we went with here. But the problem with the shot is I actually had to throw the plant left-handed and I'm right-handed. So I kind of did a few practices trying to like kind of get the motion, because I didn't want it to look like really awkward and stuff. So I had to kind of practice throwing it just to get something that looked fairly natural, and went over it a few times and then finally went to do it. And then obviously we didn't want to throw the plant against the actual wall. My dad works construction, and so he's got these trailers with all these construction parts, wood and tools and different things like that. And he had some sheets of drywall, and I just took a sheet of drywall. So if you look at the shot here, you can actually kind of see like a little bit of a line here. We tried our best to get it to blend in with the original wall as best we could. And it's funny because the first time we did this, it actually didn't break. We threw it and just went ding and like fell, and we were like, man, that stinks. So we had to take a hammer and break the pot a little bit and then throw that into the wall so that it would shatter. And then Sam had all this plastic wrap, I think, for like painting and stuff. So we had the floor covered with that to catch as much of the fertilizer as we could. When you're doing a technical shot like this, it's helpful to sort of write down like reminders, like remember to put the camera in 60 frames per second, so because it's going to be slow motion. And you want to write down all these things like a checklist just to make sure you're good to go before you shoot it, because something like this you really only have one shot at. If we messed it up, I actually had 2 potted plants just in case we needed to try again, and worst case scenario, we just go to Walmart and get another potted plant. But that's pretty much it. That's what went into the video. It was a really challenging shoot. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this. There's a lot of things we did right in this, a lot of preparation that went into it, but it was really challenging. It was only the 2 of us, aside from the scenes where Sam's girlfriend helped. Sam's girlfriend plays the girl that shows up in the video. The more help you can get, the better. I think if we had more hands, it would have been fine. And try to shoot on days where you don't really have time constraints. It depends on who you are. Some of you guys, you might work better with that pressure, and then some of you might really need the time to just be able to relax and enjoy the process. That's personally what I like. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you, or at least interesting. Until next time.